folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin, eclectic album reviews, and gentle musical meanderings. And finally, at long last, we are at the top 10 of 2020. This post, although hopefully brief in length, represents quite a bit of investigation and musical listening throughout the course of the year. I listened to over 100 albums this year, and through a very convoluted process of elimination, I boiled it down to the top 20, and this is, of course, the top 10 of those. The big thing you have to remember the first time you've seen one of these year-end posts from me, I don't really care about year of release. If it's new to me this year, it counts. And there are other stipulations that are involved and different things that I consider. And if you're curious about those things, how they work out, I'm going to post a video a little bit about the making of this post shortly after this one's up. So be on the lookout if you're curious about that sort of thing. But for now, I want to go ahead and get into it. So starting at number 10, top 20 of 2021 is Arlo Parks' Collapsed in Sunbeams.
Some of these folks wanna make you cry, but you gotta trust how
Arlo Parks' Collapsed in Sunbeams is an album that's a reflection of a person who's been through some stuff. You know, especially in her youth, I get the impression from her lyrics that there's a lot of struggles. She identifies as non-binary, but went through the process of understanding what that is about yourself, figuring out what that is. And so this is her kind of autobiography a little bit on those things, but in the rearview mirror. She's a little bit older now, 20s, something like that, which is something she worked through her teens. So the lyrics are very personal, and they're delivered in a very smooth, kind of jazzy R&B style. Great songwriting, as I've said about this album over and over again. Her delivery is awesome. And I think what's really interesting about this is that, really, if you look at the lyrics, this is almost like an emo album or something like that. But it's sheathed in this really beautiful R&B sound. And I've got a lot of respect for her putting it out there like that. Okay, at number 9, I've got Black Midi's Cavalcade.
On Main Street when John 50 comes to town. Yes, this is a scene on Main Street.
Black Midi's Cavalcade is an album of uncompromising extremes, if you really want to boil it down. On the one end, it's got this really aggro, sort of new prog side, and I mean new, post-2000 progressive rock, like Mars Volta, that sort of thing. But then on the other side, it's got almost like this jazzy lounge feel to it. Music like that, those two extremes are right at the very beginning of the album. And although the album doesn't play out in that same way throughout, that definitely the sense that it's always being crafted to surprise and keep the listener off kilter. Next up is Tally Hall's Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. Besides having the most convoluted album title, I think, of anything that I've had to deal with all year long in English. This really captures the psychedelic whimsy of the most adventurous 60s music, a la the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, that sort of feel, right? But with the perspective and the vocabulary of a mid-aughts musician, So it encompasses all this power pop history into this real kind of stylistically diverse, almost disorienting package, but it's sheathed in great songwriting and incredible musicianship throughout. Okay, number 7 is Mammoth WVH's debut album. Now, being the debut solo album of Wolfgang Van Halen, this album doesn't really have as much direct connective tissue to the style of Eddie Van Halen's music. But it's a hard rock album. It's playing the same ball game, just not the exact same rules, right? But the high level of musicianship that this album expresses really ties it to the Van Halen legacy. And these high standards he sets for himself are not really based on being a virtuosic musician on a given instrument, but instead having broad musicianship, songwriting skills, arranging skills, recording skills, and musicianship across the board, playing musicianship on a variety of instruments, really set this album above. And on top of that, this album can be looked at a couple of levels. On a more accessible level, this is a collection of kind of like pop songs and things topics that seem to be just about kind of the everyday existence. But on another level, you could read a lot of these songs like conversations with his father. And since so much of this album was made during a time when his father was either ill or passing away or had passed away, I don't think you can overlook that interpretation as you listen to the album. And number 6 is the Brendan Eder Ensembles, To Mix With Time. I was looking back trying to remember where I first heard of To Mix With Time. I don't remember exactly where, but I know Bandcamp sometimes puts out lists of best contemporary classical. I think it was on one of those lists. And I've gone back to those lists again and again. I've never found anything that really brings the sounds of the chamber music into a more contemporary setting in a better way than this one does. It's super accessible. It's also highly intellectual. There's a lot of really amazing composition going on in this album. Fantastic performances. Again, and Brett and Eder's unique take on what chamber music kind of means in the 21st century, I think sets them apart from a lot of the cult intellectualism of a lot of that contemporary classical music. Okay, at number 5 is the Once and Future Band's Deleted Scenes.
Looking for someone to sing my songs to. I'll love her even though she...
This was a perfect album for me because it really straddles the line between the best of kind of pop music and the more accessible side of progressive rock music. You've got songs on here that will bob your head up and down, like, yes, that's great, that's groovy, and you got ones that will make you shake your head. It's like, man, this is incredible piece of music that's created there. I love the sort of jazz fusion-y side of this, and I love how it's incorporated so seamlessly into the identity of the band and the individual voices of the musicians in the band. And at number 4 is Steven Wilson's The Future Bites. And I get that this album is stylistically kind of divisive amongst his fans, but this also falls to me in the category of albums that are almost programmatic in a way, because this is an album that's about what's happening to us right now, about living in the algorithm and the effect of, the internet on the human brain, right? But also like the kinds of sounds that he's using are super contemporary, and production qualities that can only be found right now with what we're doing. So it's a great encapsulation, again, of what we see in the best music of 2021. And number 3 is Bo Burnham's Inside.
To the internet, come and take a seat. Would you like to see the news or any famous women's feet? There's no need to panic.
And like The Future Bites, Bo Burnham's Inside, although arguably is a comedy album and kind of in form, this is an album that's so incisively observant about the current moment that we found ourselves in over the course of the last year, and really gives voice to a lot of our internal anxiety that people have dealt with in recent times. And I think that people are going to be looking at Bo Burnham's Inside, the movie, like in film classes for years to come, trying to figure out what it was about. What I think would be a shame is if people overlook the importance of the music in this. Now, I think you can't talk about Inside without talking about the music. But the music itself, I think in form and in fashion, is also its own commentary. The way that it deals with quick edits and quick stylistic changes, the way that it mirrors the attention span of the current listener, the kind of listener that you'd see in The Future Bites, that kind of subject, the way that they deal with things on a more internal, personal level. This album has resonated with not just me this year, but a lot of people around me. I've shared lots of great moments talking about this album with people and getting to understand what it means to us in our current lifestyle. And number 2 is Timmy Sean's A Tale from the Other Side. Now again, this is a hugely topical album that I think is a super important piece of work. It'd be a real shame if it was overlooked. This is a power pop rock opera that uses the horror movie tropes to tell the story of 2020, of whenever the virus broke out. And making an album with a narrative like that is difficult enough, and Timmy Sean put it together with such nuance and such wit, and with amazing songwriting, where each song stands on its own but also works to build the bigger narrative of the album. Extremely difficult to make all that work, and it's a real tribute to his genius and his craft that he was able to do it so well. And finally, number 1, the album of the year for me. This is one that's been with me all throughout this whole year and has come up again and again as an excellent album, and that's Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders, and London Symphony Orchestra, Promises. Now, I've done a post of this album, and I've talked about it before. I really can't describe it anything else as just being magical. It's a beautiful, meditative experience in which the 3 entities that are cited on this, Floating Points, who's actually the person who's heading up this project, but also collaborating closely with Pharoah Sanders, the London Symphony Orchestra. The combination of these 3 things connects the dots in a way that's different and makes something that's kind of new. It's not really jazz, it's not really classical, it's not really ambient electronica, but it's those 3 things together. The strength of Floating Points' vision holds the whole thing together in a super compelling way and in a very relaxed way. And Promises has come up throughout the entire year. It's been connected to so many points that were important to me, events that happened, things that I was close to. My wife used it as part of her dissertation. It's just an amazing album that I've really connected with personally, and I think it's also intellectually interesting and also very, very aesthetically pleasing, and definitely an artistic success overall. A phenomenal artistic success. So, Album of the Year 2021. Anyway, I hope you like this post. It represents a lot of investment, and I really can stand by a lot of these albums as some of the finest music I've listened to this year. I'm going to be coming up very quickly, as I said, with a post that'll kind of explain the whole process. And then very soon, we're going to be starting in with a whole new batch of music. Lots and lots of roundups, lots and lots of new music as we set the stage going into 2022. So have a very happy new year, and I'll see you guys again on the flip side.